Hello everyone and welcome back to the Politico Agri-Food Summit live from Brussels. My name is Arthur Neslin. I'm a reporter for Politico covering the agri-food beat. Before we begin, I just want to remind you to submit questions via the Politico Events app, which you can download online. Once you open the app, you just have to go to the item program and click on the relevant session. For instance, panel discussion, and then click on the tab video feed. You can also tweet about the interview that we're having today, the joint interview, with our hashtag PoliticoAgriFood. As well as all that, we're having an audience poll, and our question is, how can Europe best move towards shorter supply chains? You can vote on that on Slido by using the hashtag PoliticoAgriFood. I'd like to now welcome our speakers. We're joined from Austria by Johannes Fankhauser. Although I don't think we can see him at this stage, we should be able to hear him. He's the Agricultural and Rural Development Director General in the Ministry for Sustainability and Tourism. We're also joined here in the studio in Brussels by Tassos Haniotis, who's the Director for Strategy, Simplification and Policy Analysis at the Commission's DG Agri. We're joined here also on the same platform by Yannis Meis, the President of the European Council of Young Farmers, SEJA. He's here in person. And also from further north, we have Martin Scholten, the Strategic Advisor on the Executive Board at Wageningen University and Research. Welcome to all of you. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Now, we're going to be discussing the Green Deal today, which has dominated the public debate about agriculture in Brussels this year, and the ripples also from the farm to fork strategy particularly, and the biodiversity strategy, which show no sign of abating. It's probably best if we begin with a brief recap of where we're up to. The Commission, in its farm to fork proposal, proposed legislative targets for 2030 of reducing the use of hazardous pesticides by 50%, and also the use and risks of all pesticides also by 50%, cutting nutrient losses from fertilizers by 50%, and that's equating to roughly a 20% cut in fertilizer use, and mandating that 10% of all agricultural farmland be kept for biodiversity-friendly, non-productive uses. Since this was proposed, we've seen strong pushback from EU member states against any suggestion that these targets be implemented with enforceable legislation. And I'd like to begin by asking Tassos. Tassos, do you think these targets can be met without it?
The targets are proposed to be met, actually. They're not proposed just for the sake of proposing them. But what we have to make a very clear distinction is that we're talking about targets that look towards a transition with some perspective towards 2030. And we need to make also clear that these targets are general targets at the EU level. That doesn't mean that we have to translate the same numbers in every single member state. We have to look very carefully into the situation of the member state. Not every member state has the same challenge when it comes to soil, when it comes to emissions, to biodiversity, water use, or pesticides or antibiotics in animals. So we have to look very carefully into the specific situation of member states and try, in our recommendations, focus and prioritize exactly these areas that they have to improve more. And what we also need to keep in mind is that we're facing a situation where we do have experiences and examples on the ground that indicate not just that moving forward and improving the performance is possible, but we have concrete examples that can demonstrate how exactly to do it. And the biggest challenge I think that we're facing today is being able to communicate better with concrete examples and not just in a general theoretical discussion.
Okay, well, it sounds from what you're saying about meeting these targets at the EU level that there could be scope for some sort of effort-sharing legislation. Is that an option which you'd like to see explored?
right now we are in a situation where the co-legislator has to move forward the discussions about the shape, the final shape of the cap for the future, and how exactly in this final shape, with what we have proposed, we're going to be able to achieve these targets. I think we have introduced a dilemma that is a bit artificial. Way before the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, we had prepared an impact assessment on the future of the CAP that demonstrated clearly that despite the progress made in certain areas related to the environment, we needed to do much more. And it's not by accident that we put as a big priority environmental and climate focus. Now, the exact shape that this is going to take will be the result of the negotiations that we'll have to focus on, and we're focusing on. What we need to do is make this discussion concrete. And making this discussion concrete means that in the strategic plans that the member states have to develop, the starting point has to be the concrete analysis of the challenges that they face. And this is not done in closed doors. This is done in the public domain with information and facts and data that we all know what they are. And this is also done with the possibility of member states to have flexible solutions. We're not asking member states to do one thing alone, be only organic, only precision farming, or agroecology. Combine a series of different practices and try to get a better result.
Okay, well, I noticed that you're not ruling out some form of effort-sharing legislation.
The legislation is for the legislators to decide.
Okay, but it's certainly something which you seem to have raised. You say let's talk concretely. Okay, well, let's talk concretely about the recommendations. If you make recommendations in line with the Farm to Fork proposal, and member states just say, well, that's an interesting idea, but maybe you can't quite do it this year. If they choose not to follow them adequately to your satisfaction, what can you do about it?
I think the most important thing is the starting point. The starting point is what in our jargon is called the SWOT analysis, the analysis of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And in this discussion, which already takes place and in which we cooperate with the member states, we don't seem to find that many differences in the identification of the problem. So here we already are at a point where everybody recognizes that we have to do much more when it comes to the environment. When the member states come up with a specific solution of how to address these problems, they have a full spectrum of measures to address. As long as we stick to the issues and the type of proposals we have made, we believe that this is possible. The real challenge, and Wolfgang mentioned it already yesterday, is if there is a watering down of the proposal we have made. This is the real problem we face. I don't believe that if we come up with something that looks pretty close to what we have proposed, we're going to face a situation like the problematic of not meeting the targets. Where clearly we're going to face a problem is if there is a real watering down of the type of proposals we made that demonstrate the need for more ambition in environment and climate action.
Do you think that's happening?
It is clearly in the interest of some to push in that direction. But I would like to hope that we all agree that when we talk about addressing climate and environment, we have to address climate and environment. One of the problems we're having is we have isolated too much the debate between climate and environment as being something that is contradictory to moving more also in the economic efficiency. And that's why I mentioned before the need to have concrete discussions, because there are ways of improving economic and environmental efficiency at the same time. How to do it is by moving in a green and a digital transition. Okay. And we have to do it fast.
Well, just one more question, Tassos, and I appreciate your answers, which are actually quite enlightening, but just in terms of the recommendations, which you have, in terms of the strategic plans that you've been receiving, how many of them so far have been in line with the Farm to Fork proposals?
We haven't received any strategic plans yet. No? What we have is a discussion with member states in their analysis of of the situation. We are in the process of preparing recommendations to the member states that will be recommendations that are not going to go into the details of how exactly to do things. We'll try to prioritize where we think the big challenges that they face, and then the member states will have to prepare their strategic plans and submit them to us. And this is a process that is already taking place in different forms in different member states with a public dialogue. Somewhere the dialogue is more advanced, in other parts there could be more openness, but it's a process that is for the next year and not for this year, actually.
Can you just, which parts could there be more openness in?
I think in terms of bringing more stakeholders into the debate, but it's for member states to set up the stakeholder consultation process.
Okay, thanks very much, Tassos. Yanis, who's also here, the president of the European Council of Young Farmers. How do you survey this new sort of shiny Green Deal on the horizon? Is it for you an opportunity? Is it more of a challenge? And if it is a challenge, what do you feel you need to meet that challenge?
Well, it has the potential to be both, I would say, and so a lot will depend on how the discussion will be taken forward in the coming weeks and months. I would say that the concrete strategies that have been announced, whether it is Farm to Fork or Biodiversity, the two most important for the farming sector in Europe, the word that springs to mind is rather disappointment instead of opportunity or challenge. Disappointment not only with what is mentioned there, but I would say mainly disappointment with what is missing from the strategy. The strategy at itself, and that is how it is pronounced by the Commission itself, was this once-in-a-lifetime chance to bring coherence between food and agricultural policies. Well, we don't see a lot of coherence. We see that many of the challenges which the farming sector are coping with today are not at all included. And so you can't talk about a coherent answer to those challenges if you don't even mention those major challenges.
Well, here's a chance to mention them. Which challenges are you talking about?
Well, there are a few, obviously, on the economic side of things which are vocalized often enough by the sector. But let me focus on a more social one, the one that I think as young farmers we claim to voice on quite hard is generational renewal. So we see a huge lack of young people not only wanting to farm, but mainly a huge lack of them enabling themselves to farm successfully. So to start up a farming activity or to keep on farming in those first few years. And one of the major struggles that those young people face in that startup or in that development is difficult access to land. Access to land acknowledged by all the services in the Commission to be the single biggest barrier for young farmers. Well, we see that the strategy as this proposed is not only not providing a solution to that struggle, it is even including the potential of worsening the situation for young farmers with, for example, the 10% non-productive area in farming. So if the services in the Commission, and let's call Frans Timmermans by his name, but together with all of his colleagues in the college, at the end, if he doesn't care about what we as young farmers say, I can understand that. That's not his job to care for one particular part of his audience, but at least he should care about the potential of succeeding in the overall ambition, an ambition that we do support. So the Sustainable Development Goals defined by the United Nations, which are the framework under which the Green Deal should be built, is something that we fully support. But one of the key elements of those Sustainable Development Goals is they are equal in value. They should be achieved all together. There is no prioritization within the 17 goals. And that is what we also feel the Green Deal should embody, is do not prioritize between the goals, no, tackle them alongside. And so make sure that the challenges that farmers are facing today and will be facing in the approach that we are adhering to, but make sure that those challenges are also taken on board and provided with decent answers.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned the 10% non-productive land target, which comes out of the biodiversity strategy. I mean, I suppose environmentalists would say, well, the experience of the last cap was that I think it was 66 billion euros, I could be wrong, I think it was 66 billion, was supposed to go to biodiversity spending within the cap, and there was nothing to show for it at the end. I mean, I appreciate that's also an issue of monitoring. but it is the case that farmland birds have been declining on farmland in ways that birds in forests have not been declining in the same volumes of numbers over the last 10, 20 years. I mean, there is a problem there. There is an issue which has to be resolved. If it's not to be resolved by expanding the amount of landscape features and trees and hedges, places in which biodiversity can thrive, how do you suggest resolving it?
Yeah, so let me be very clear that indeed it is something to resolve. Also, that ambition is one that as young farmers we absolutely share to do better also for biodiversity, whether they are birds or other kinds. Now, landscape features have a role there. And so we do believe that indeed some different instruments than the past CAP should be put in place. So the greening of past CAP also for farmers wasn't the most successful model to go forward. Now the 10% case, which is now the big proposal, has the disadvantage that it's in the way of implementing will only increase the difficulties that we already have with the hectare-based payment scheme today. Meaning that it makes the access to land for young farmers difficult because landowners, big landowners in some member states, retired farmers in others, environmental NGOs in other member states, they tend to grip vast amounts of that land because of the payment which is attached to it. If you make a non-productive payment on top of that, you make it even easier for those big landowners to keep hold on that land and make it even more difficult for young farmers or farmers in general in that case to do their best on the practices that they are conveying. Because if I tend to lose a part of the land that I'm using today, which is rented from a big landowner, which will then see, well, okay, I can for the same money just do nothing, or at least some non-productive activity on the land and keep all the money myself, then I will be expected to have a similar production, because at least my production capacity needs to remain in order on a lower amount of land, and so will have to be pushed to become even more intensive, which is the contrary of what they are trying to reach with the same model.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, it seems to be this comes down to the actual cap structure itself and payments according to the hectare per hectare instead of per unit of labour, for example. Which, I mean, is that if there was a move in that direction, would you be able to support it? Would you support a 10% set aside if you had more guaranteed access to payments on the basis of your labour as opposed to your land?
The precondition for any scheme to work, whether an environmental scheme or an economic scheme, is a clear definition of active farmers. And as long as that is not the case in the European Union, we cannot be expected to fully use the incentives which are provided by the European Union, because they are not turning up on our plate at the end. They are turning up on the plate of non-active farmers.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much for that, Janus. However, we're running out of time, and I really would like to bring in our guests who have been patiently waiting. Johannes, can I come to you first in Austria? One of the targets proposed in the legislation, in the Farm to Fork proposal, is for 25% of Europe's farmland to be organic by 2030. I was just wondering, ideally, would Austria like to see that being binding across Europe?
Hello and welcome from Vienna to all participants. Thank you for the invitation to this event, to this summit. I think it's a very important issue, and especially in these times of the COVID crisis, we have to discuss about the Green Deal, about the organic production, and a lot of other things. I would say, you mentioned the organic production, but the Green Deal in agriculture, it isn't rhetoric, it's reality already. I would say that the farmers make significant contributions to achieve the targets of the Green Deal. And I would say, and it's about the organic production also, it's only the question, how can we optimize these farms to best support and to reach the goals? It's clear that we have to do more efforts, need to prioritize sustainability and food security. In Austria, I would say there's we in a good situation, you mentioned, and I would say 80% of all Austrian farmers would already meet the criteria for the targets of the Green Deal. But we do have a very wide range of different types of farms in Europe, high diversity. We appreciate the Green Deal goals and the targets, but I think the one-size-fits-all model, and the director mentioned it, we need flexibility. And for the organic production, I see a really huge problem in the market. What's going on with the market if in whole Europe will be 25 or 30% of the land organically produced? Therefore, there are a lot of challenges, and the challenges in the member states are very different. That I want to stress on the point that the one-size-fits-all model doesn't work.
Okay, well, you're talking about problems. One of the arguments sometimes I hear about organics is that they lead to reduced yields. If the more organic farming you have, the less volumes of crops you have, and that can affect food security. What has been your experience in that regard?
Our experience is very positive. We do have a high yield of organic production. About 25% of all agriculture land is produced organically, and I don't see it black or white. You can't say the organic production is better than the conventional production. We have efforts in the conventional production, and we have to do more about sustainability. But it's you can't say organic production and solve all our problems. We have a very good experience in Austria, and the key, I would say, and the key for the organic production and the sustainability of the farm production is the second pillar of the CRP. And in Austria, we spend about 2/3 of the public agriculture expenditure in the rural development program for more organic farming, for more agro-environmental scheme, for more sustainability. That, I would say, that's the key. But I want to stress one more. We need a link strategies. We do have 3 strategies. I would say the CRP, the most important strategy for the farmers, the Green Deal with the biodiversity and the farm-to-fork strategy. We need a link, and the timetable could be better.
Okay, well, just on one last question, Johannes, just on the related issue of glyphosate, which your government has tried to ban despite opposition from Brussels. I was just wondering if you were still intending or hoping or planning to prohibit the substance before the end of the year.
Oh, I don't think so. There's the government has here a clear position, and the parliament 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago make a decision that there should glyphosate be banned, and there was a clear position of the European Commission, and I would say we accept that the European Commission decision there can't be a ban of the whole glyphosate.
Do you think the Commission got the balance right in the way it handled this issue?
I think so. I would say it's important that we have the same rules in all member states, and the use of plant protection and pesticides and fertilizers. There should be the same rule.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'd like to remind everyone to vote in our poll, which is still going on, and the question, which I wrongly stated at the beginning, is in fact, which of the following elements do you consider the most important for sustainable agriculture? And that's a poll presented by Corteva. Can I now bring in Martin Scholten? Martin, sorry it's taken so long to get to you. We've been having a very engrossing conversation. I'd like to bring you into it. A lot of the political arguments around the Green Deal is going to depend on science, and the science is contested, and it's going to become more contested the closer we get to any kind of legislation, certainly when we get into the impact assessments. I was wondering, what to you does a scientifically sound, evidence-based approach look like in this context, and how will we know if we're not getting one?
Yeah, actually, we are facing a future food system that should be based on two main principles. It should be good in its basics. And one of the principles is that we not looking only for the production efficiency, but in the same time also looking for resource sufficiency, so that we are managing our food system more from a perspective of the resources. And the resources at one place are different than the resources at the other place. And the second one is the resilience. We need resilient farm systems. We need a resilient food system. And resilience comes along with customized adaptation to the local conditions, but also resilience comes also by diversity. And I'm not meaning biodiversity, but diversity in the agri-food system. And actually what I see when I look at the Green Deal farm to fork strategy is that yeah, there are targets. Yes, TASUS also say diversity is important, and it should come up with strategic plans from the various countries, given the position in those countries. But there are targets, and the targets are more related to what should be done in a directive way, the traditional way of European policy. Then it gives room for the farmers to find their best way in sustainability from the planetary perspective, from a health perspective. The best way given the local conditions. Giving the entrepreneurship, giving the craftsmanship of the farmers. We have to trust them, especially when we're thinking about the next generation farmers, young farmers. They need trust. They need room for this innovation. And yeah, my plea is there is where science can be supportive. Science cannot be supportive in setting targets, which is more or less prescriptive. Science can help to assess the performance of farmers in sustainability on the basis of their practice, and that's a blend. Some farmers can do something in transforming the general farm practices. Others can contribute to a transition of the total food system, whereas in some places, overproduction can lead to a reduction of the production as such. But what I see is a general reduction of the production capacity, a dichotomy in conventional and organic farming. There is much more on the horizon. There are many roads to, in the final end, come to a sustainable food system.
In terms of the various roads ahead of us, the Green Deal is the one we're focused on. If we don't make the ecological transition that the Green Deal talks about in terms of agriculture, what will be the consequences for zoonotic disease? That's something you've written about, I believe.
Yeah. Actually, the resilience of the food system will also help to be prepared for disruptors like the climate change, but also like the zoonotic pandemic that we're now facing, and all the other zoonotic infections. I think a resilient food system can be robust and can be not a factor for the transfer of infections amongst the connected food system as we have in the world, as we have in Europe. But that means that we have to find the best practice at a certain place, which means that it is robust, that you really be using the fertilizers in the best way, that you're not having the need for pesticide control in the way as we did, but not starting with that. But that should be the result. So the target should be more the result than the directions. We really need in Europe a much stronger preparedness program, emergency preparedness program for zoonotics, for climate change impacts, etc. Our system is not robust enough. And if we start there, and if we can count upon the farmers to make their system customized, tailor-made, robust, I think then we go along the ecological way of our future food system. And organic farming is one option, but is not the only option, and is in some cases not the best option.
Well, that's a path we're not going to go down in this conversation right now because we don't have much time, and we have been getting a lot of questions, some questions coming in from the audience. Tassos, can I put a couple of these to you? Here's one: if we achieve to allocate 40% of funds from Pillar 1 of the CAP to eco schemes, will the other 60% be used for unsustainable agriculture?
The answer is clearly no, and that's one of the false dilemmas we tend to introduce all the time. We should not forget that there is a starting baseline about good agricultural environmental conditions. And not only is there a starting baseline, but this baseline has to be higher than what we have today. And it does not mean that if you get a direct payment and you respect your good agricultural environmental conditions, that you do something that is damaging for the environment. Neither does it mean that if you get money and you spend it for agro-environmental measures, you're going to have the results that are necessary. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the problems that we see in the environment. And that's exactly, I think Martin raised a very important point, which is how exactly we make this tailor-made. One of the proposals we made is to have a farm sustainability data network where we add to the existing information about environmental impacts of the farm, and we link it to the farm advisory system and to the research. If we don't have a functioning farm advisory system, we will end up always polarizing the debate between a black and white situation, and it's much more complex in reality.
Okay, well, just one other question about reality I'd like to ask from our audience, which is directed specifically to you, Tassos. It says many people speak about digital tools helping to achieve the Green Deal and Farm to Fork objectives. Generally, that's accepted. However, what does the Commission believe needs to be done to do this beyond investing in Horizon Europe?
What needs to be done is to, again, practically, all farmers have some sort of smartphone or one way or the other. The real question is, do they have applications that help them improve their day-to-day practice on the farm? And if they don't know how to download these applications, what is the role of the public authorities in helping them to do that? Because if we move in this direction, we will see that the solutions that exist on the ground are way much more than what we make it believe currently.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Tassos. Thanks to all of you. I'm sorry we couldn't go on any longer. It was a fascinating discussion. I'd like to announce the outcome of the poll. However, we don't have it. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. We can't hear. Please stay tuned. We have another panel discussion coming up called Can Europe Make the Equation of Food Security and Biodiversity Work, with some expert speakers, expert panelists, as ours has been. In the meantime, have a 10-minute break and enjoy looking through the Politico Events app.